As I've said before, and I will say over and over again, you are the magic. What's up, witches? I'm Allie, the Bronx Witch, and on my channel, I make videos about Wicca, the religion, witchcraft, the practice, and I do weekly tarot readings. And today is a very blustery, cloudy day, so I thought this would be a good opportunity to sit down and talk to you a little bit about the tools of magical practice when you are a Wiccan. Before I get started, it's super important for me to say that I am a firm believer that no physical tool whatsoever is necessary for completing magical work. As I've said before, and I will say over and over again, you are the magic. Magic is the act of taking an intention, a desire, a thought, an idea, and putting enough energy into it that you can manifest it here in the physical world. So you don't need anything else but yourself, your own pure intention, and your desire to see the thing that's in your mind and in your heart coming into fruition in front of you in reality. Witches use tools and correspondences in order to help them to raise their energy, change their own personal vibration, and direct their energy towards a desired outcome. These tools and correspondences are very helpful in that regard, but they are not necessary. So I don't want anyone to freak out or think that you need to go out and spend a bunch of money, or that there is a certain amount of stuff that you're supposed to have in order to call yourself a witch or to execute super strong and effective magic. What I'm going to talk about today are the tools that many witches use in order to accomplish the goal of raising and generating energy and sending their intention out into the world. And in a Wiccan context, the tools that we use to reflect certain elements, to relate to the god and the goddess, and to help us honor spirit in a whole host of ways. It's important that I point out that I am Wiccan and this video is about Wicca. So these are the tools that most Wiccans find useful in accomplishing those goals. They are not necessarily representative of the tools that witches from other traditions or who are not Wiccan would find necessary or even useful. But if you are interested in practicing magic or setting up your magical space in the ways that reflect Wiccan values and intentions, then this video is for you. So I first want to start off with what I believe and what I think most Wiccans would probably say are the 5 necessary tools that you would want to have in your magical arsenal. When it comes to Wiccan witchcraft, the elements are incredibly important. We work with them to pretty much accomplish everything, and it's important to us to honor those elements at most rituals and in the course of most spell working. So if you're just starting out on a Wiccan path and you just want to begin to practice magic or to start setting up a sacred space for yourself with Wiccan principles in mind, then I would start there. You would want one representation of each of the 5 elements: air, earth, fire, water, and spirit. What you use to represent these 5 elements is entirely up to you, and there's no set in stone way to do this. But there are certain tools that are pretty common, and so I'll mention those to you now. The element of earth is most often represented on a Wiccan altar or in some type of Wiccan setup in the form of salt. Salt, obviously coming directly from the earth. It's not only a representation of earth, it's also a very useful magical tool. Salt is one of the most effective and powerful cleansing agents because it has the ability to absorb negative energy. And so it's really useful when trying to cleanse an item, cleanse a space, or cleanse yourself. So you will almost always see salt in some form on any Wiccan's altar or in their space. Typically, sea salt is preferred, but regular old table salt will suffice as well. Next, we have the element of water. And it's most common for Wiccans, of course, to just use water to represent water. That's probably the easiest way to do it. But there are plenty of other ways in which you could do this. If, let's say, for example, you are setting up an altar or doing some type of a spell that you're trying to keep really low key, or you're traveling and therefore can't actually have physical water on you. Things like seashells or even small statues of fish, dolphins, or mermaids could all be useful as an element of water. It's common for Wiccans to keep a bowl of water on their altar or to set one up when they are going to perform a ritual or a spell. Spring water is usually preferred, but any type of filtered water is fine. If all you have is tap water, that's totally okay. It's just a good idea to run it through some type of a filter if you can, just to remove any impurities. And it's common for the salt and the water at some point during rituals or spells to be combined together in order to make a holy water, blessed water, cleansed water for the purpose of cleansing your items, your space, or yourself. The next element is fire, and just like any of these elements, it's totally up to you how you would want to represent them. But typically, Wiccans would represent the element of fire with the use of a candle. Candles vary, and every witch has their preferred types of candle. This can be a tea light, this could be a tapered candle, or it could even be something as small as a birthday candle. Next, we have the element of air, which is usually represented with the use of incense. But again, you can find any representation that works well for you. If lighting incense isn't possible for you, you could use other representations such as a feather. And finally, but arguably most importantly, we have the representation of spirit. This is typically represented with a pentacle. Usually a tile, piece of wood, clay, or stone is inscribed with the 5-pointed star encircled in a circle. The pentacle is an ancient symbol. It's been used by many different cultures and many different spiritual paths. For Wiccans, it represents the 5 elements all enclosed in one, and is a symbol that reminds us that all of Earth's elements are all connected in a really important and powerful way. You can purchase or make a pentacle tile for your altar or for use in rituals or spells, but you could also just take a piece of paper and draw one on it. If you have one tool that represents all 5 of the elements, you pretty much are all set. You would be able to set up a simple altar or prepare yourself for a spell or ritual conducted in the Wiccan way. But there are some other tools that are totally optional that you will find Wiccans often keep in their space or utilize when they are doing magical workings. I'll start off by talking about the broom or besom. The broom represents the goddess and the god. The shaft represents the god and the bottom part represents the goddess. And a spiritual broom or besom is used for energetic cleaning, not for real cleaning. In fact, most witches would not put their besom directly on the floor. A besom can be bought or made, and it can be as small as something you can hold in your hand or really large. But either way, it should only be used for spiritual practice. The broom also relates to the element of water. So it could be used in your sacred space or during ritual as a representation of that element. Next, we have your wand. The wand has been used for thousands of years in spiritual and magical practices. It is used both for invoking the goddess and the god and to direct energy. It's considered by most to be the representation of God energy because of its phallic shape, and it relates to the element of air. So again, if you're not able to burn incense or find some other representation of air, your wand could suffice. Just like your broom, you can make one or buy one. But either way, it should be made of a natural material like wood, clay, or crystal. Next, let's talk about the cauldron. The cauldron is also a tool that has been used for thousands of years for both practical and magical purposes. And it's really central to practicing magic in a traditional Wiccan fashion. It's a staple of Wiccan practice, and oftentimes traditional Wiccan rituals will be held standing around the cauldron. In olden days, it would be set above a fire, and magical brews and concoctions would be boiled inside. Or it would be filled with water to be used as a large scrying bowl. Nowadays, most of us don't have an outdoor setup that would be appropriate for this, so most of the action happens inside of the cauldron. Petition papers, herbs, incense, and other magical items are burned inside. Your cauldron can be big or small, but it should be made of iron with 3 legs and an opening that is smaller than the widest part of it. The cauldron represents the goddess and feminine energy, and it relates to the element of water. So if for some reason you're not able to have water on your altar or don't have access to water and you want to cast a spell or hold a ritual, you could use your cauldron as a representation of that element. Next, we have our magical knives. And there are 2 types of knives that a Wiccan will usually keep in his or her toolbox. The first is your athame. The athame isn't used for cutting, but rather to direct energy. It's dull and has a double-edged blade, usually with a dark handle. The athame is representative of the god and relates to the element of fire. So again, if you don't have candles or can't light one, you could use your athame to represent the element of fire. I think now is also a good time to mention that the elemental representations that I am mentioning are not set in stone. For example, in the tarot, wands represent fire and swords represent air. So it's totally fine if you feel that any of these tools represent some other element and want to use them in that way. The other type of magical knife that a Wiccan will often use is called the boline. It's a practical working knife. It's made from a carved piece of metal that is sharp enough to cut, but it is usually only used to cut herbs, inscribe symbols, cut cords, or perform other magical operations. It is cleansed and blessed and oftentimes kept on or near the altar, just like the athame. But because it's great for cutting herbs in a magical or ceremonial way, many Wiccans keep their boline with their gardening tools. Next, we have a crystal sphere. Divination is a central practice to magic as a Wiccan. Magic is mental, so exercising the psychic mind makes it possible for us to do what we do. While we don't all use crystal balls as our main form of divination, having a crystal ball in a special place on the altar is a way of honoring the psychic mind and the act of divination. The crystal can be large or small, and it can be an actual piece of quartz crystal or simply clear glass. It is a representation of the goddess and relates to the element of water. To care for your crystal, you should cleanse it when you first receive it by sprinkling it with salt water or bathing it in smoke from an appropriate herb like mugwort or lavender. Place it out under the full moon to charge it, and then keep it covered on your altar with a black cloth when not in use. It's also a good idea to periodically charge it by setting it out under the full moon, especially if you are using it for scrying. Next, we have a chalice, which is a footed cup that symbolizes the goddess and relates to the element of water. It can be made of any natural material and can be fancy or plain. Some Wiccans use their chalice to hold their water on their altar, while others will use a bowl for that and reserve their chalice for more ceremonial acts like offering libations, aka offerings, to deities, elementals, or spirits, or for taking communion during esbats or Sabbat rituals. Sound is one of the most powerful forms of energy vibration. Our human bodies really feel and respond to it, but so does spiritual energy. Bells can be rung both to clear away energy or to draw in spirit energy. Wiccans usually keep a bell on their altar and use it during spells and rituals to invoke the goddess, as it's a symbol of feminine energy. But it can also be used to invoke deity generally. And again, your bell can be large or small, fancy or plain. And last, but certainly not least, we have the Book of Shadows. Arguably the most important tool for a Wiccan, it is a workbook of invocations, prayers, spells, rituals, recipes, and information. Most Book of Shadows are made by each individual Wiccan, but some have been handed down from generation to generation or are used by many within the context of a coven. Making a Book of Shadows can be overwhelming, especially in this day and age of the internet. It seems like so many people are incredibly skilled and talented at making really beautiful books. But I just want to remind you that you don't have to be a Picasso to create your Book of Shadows. It's not about what it looks like, it's about the information contained within. So your Book of Shadows can be something as simple as a composition notebook, a binder, or it can even be a Google Drive or a file on your phone. What matters is that it is a collection of your words and images, and that it's treated with reverence and respect. If you would like to see a video on how I put together my Book of Shadows and some pointers on how to cleanse and consecrate it, check out my video, which I will link for you above. So again, I just want to remind you that none of the tools that I mentioned in this video are an absolute necessity, even if you are interested in following a Wiccan path. It's important to remember that magical intention and manifestation comes from within, and that these tools, which represent the natural elements and the energies that we would like to use to help us to accomplish our goals, are just that. They're there to help us. So as you move through your spiritual practice, you will get a hang for which of these tools is actually important to your spiritual practice. You may use some of them, you may use all of them, or you may use none of them. What works best for you is what matters the most. If you would like to learn more about these tools or setting up a sacred space in the Wiccan way, there are 2 books that I would definitely recommend taking a look at. The first is Wicca, A Guide for the Solitary Practitioner by Scott Cunningham. The other is Wikipedia, A Modern Day White Witch's Guide by Sean Robbins and Leanna Greenway. So if you found this video helpful or if you just liked it, make sure to give me a thumbs up. If you have any comments or questions, just leave them for me down below. And of course, subscribe. Click on the bell button so you're notified every time a new video comes out. You can follow me on Instagram at BronxWitch, and I will see you in the next video. Blessed be.